Sonora Deyell from Journey Care and Legacy and the moderator for our hospice and end-of-life care group. Today I have Miss Wendy Deyell with us, who has been kind enough to share her testimony about a time of grief and loss in her life. And hello, Miss Deyell, how are you?
Hi, Sonora. I'm good, thanks. Call me Wendy, please.
Wendy. Okay, Wendy, thank you for joining us today. It's really a pleasure to have you. And we want to thank our watchers and members and those who support us. And we hope that your story will touch the lives of many that I know are going through a tough period at this time, and those who are still trying to go through the period of losing someone and haven't found a way. So I'll go ahead and turn the mic to you and have you share with us a bit about your loss and grief.
Yeah, well, I guess, first of all, thank you for having me. And I hope that by sharing my story, it may in some way either just help people to know there's other people experiencing what they're going through, or that maybe something I say might help someone. Because I was the caregiver for my mom 4 years ago, where she was fell ill and was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and diagnosed in end of October of 2010. And they never told us, but I think they didn't expect her really to get to Christmas, the fact that she was going to die, because they knew right away once they operated it was terminal. Mm-hmm. I think that was for her probably the hardest part, was accepting that she was going to die. But once she did, the way I describe it is we actually lived her dying together. So rather than starting to die, she continued to live. Mm-hmm. And I think that helped all of us cope a little bit. And I have 3 siblings, so we all dealt with it in different ways. But I had to focus on Mom because I was living with her and I was looking after her.
Now, Wendy, if I may ask, how long ago was this?
4 years ago. Yeah.
So it's not that long ago.
No, it's long enough that the initial pain has dissipated, but wow, there's days that still it catches me, and I want to pick up the phone and call her, or because she visited me so often here in Belgium. She was in Toronto. There's so many things in this apartment here that she helped me buy or we did together. So there's just as much memory of her here as there is in Toronto. So sometimes it catches me unaware.
So do you go through the waves? Does it sometimes come in waves? From what I hear, people tell me all the time that their grief comes in waves and they never know when it's going to come or how it's going to hit them.
I would say that's really an accurate description of it. And certainly that's in the early times, in the first 2 years, that's probably happens more often, that some little thing catches you and just sends you into a total spin, and the tears come and you can't stop them. I find it happens less often now, but when it comes, it's still it still hits you just as hard sometimes. A little distance helps, but it's still.
I'm sorry. So do you find like the things that you have in your house, as you mentioned earlier, do you find them to be helpful? Did you ever have a period you went through where maybe you had to take down pictures for a little while to cope at the beginning of your grief when you first lost your mother?
Oh, that's an interesting question. No, I didn't. In fact, I wanted to have things around me. And there was a particular picture that I used to look at every night because it really reminded me of a holiday we had, and it made me feel close to her. So I think in my case, no, I didn't do that. Although I have known other people who've felt the need to do that because it was just too raw.
Mm-hmm. And what about the shock at the beginning? I'm referring, I know it's 4 years back, but did you go through a shock period where you couldn't believe that your mom was gone, or acted in some ways that you were still hanging on to something that was no longer there?
I think even before that, before she died, even the first shock was the diagnosis, because she was such a healthy person. She was 84, but she was really active, and she did water aerobics 3-4 times a week, and she was still driving, and she was, going out with friends, and she was very active, and nobody would have even believed she was 84. So I think the first shock was that there was something that wrong with her that had been absolutely undetectable until it was too late. And then, even just getting through that, and I actually remember my sister-in-law asking me, okay, we all start crying at different times when we think about your mom, but you're with her and you have to be strong for her. So when do you cry? And I actually, when I thought about it, my answer was, I cry into my swimming goggles, because I used to go to the pool in my mom's apartment building and swim, and that was when I could have my crying moments. And
so you would kind of avoid crying around your mom because you didn't want to upset her more than she was, I'm guessing.
yeah, I think at the beginning, while we were all adjusting to it, and there's always that there's often that waiting period while they're making a final diagnosis. And in some of that time when you don't really know what's going to happen, and then once you do, I think we were always concerned that we would upset her more by crying. I think later on, as we moved through the process and having almost an entire year of living her dying, allowed us to be much more honest with our emotions. Certainly she and I, we'd have our times where we'd either just get angry with each other, or we would get really upset, and she would be mourning the loss of her own life, or I'd be upset. And it actually got to the point where we could talk about those things, and that for me was one of the treasures, that we had a close relationship anyway. But the best thing for me, and why I really treasure that time, was because we became even closer, and we got to the point where we didn't talk about everything, but we talked about the things that mattered, and we did the things that mattered.
Right.
And
So then you don't have any, or you didn't, did you go through any period in time where you were feeling any kind of guilt or anything like that? Did you go through any of that?
I think that was probably more while she was dying, wishing that I'd done certain things with her or not. After she died, I felt there's still things that come up now that I wish I'd asked her, or I wish we'd talked about, but I wouldn't say I have any regrets, because I think we managed to cover off the important things. And some of those important things were just sitting, holding each other's hands and not talking. It was what I found lovely about it as we went further along, was the fact that we could be comfortable doing the little things that you don't do day to day. So I read to her. First, it started out with the newspaper. Then we started reading the Anne of Green Gables books, which had been really important in her childhood. And then she passed on her hard copy books to me. So we did things like that together that are such small things. And it really was the circle of life in a lot of ways. We were returning to childhood in a way. It was her childhood this time.
Yes, absolutely. So she had pancreatic cancer, you said.
Yeah.
So. And so let me ask you, and she was in hospice care?
Yeah, so we were very, very fortunate that in a big city like Toronto, there was palliative care available for her to be at home. So she was in the hospital when they did the first surgery, and there were times when I had to take her in to have adjustments to a biliary bypass and other things, but she lived at home. And even when we had to have a hospital bed for her, she was at home.
So you had in-home hospice care?
We had amazing, amazing care. And that for me that's also why she lived so long, because she got used to having the wonderful nurses we had. The doctors were brilliant. One particular doctor who was just incredible. And what I realized the day she died, I realized that what we'd succeeded in doing, in fact, was creating a positive bubble around us. And everybody who came in the apartment, if there was any negative energy around them, they never came back.
Oh, good.
She,
That's important.
yeah, we both realized it, and we'd feel it, and we just found nice ways to, change a caregiver or whatever it took, so that there was only positive energy. There was a lot of flowers that either we bought or people bought for us. Music. We really just used simple things to keep our energy positive and make it look pretty and feel nice. And, there were really tough times, but we tried to keep it as normal and as nice an atmosphere as possible.
It sounds like you guys were doing exactly what you're supposed to do and what hospice actually encourages people to do, and make people understand that hospice care is like a holistic type of care. And it seems like you guys were really on top of things, and that's really nice.
I think
a lot of people are not.
And I think we were lucky because we had great people around us. But I do think that if you really listen to the dying person and your own feelings, I think that most people in their own humanity will go in the right direction. Because I read something after she had died that was by a French doctor who deals with palliative care. And in hindsight, I understood we had done pretty much everything the right way, if there is a right way, but it was the right way for her, and that's all that mattered.
Would you like to share a little bit about that writing part?
About how things were right, you mean? Or
no, you said there was a piece that was written, or an author.
Yes, there was a brilliant French doctor who has been a part of developing the palliative care program in France, Marie Deyell, and she wrote a book, and the name escapes me at the moment, but she wrote about her experience as, I believe she's a psychiatrist in a palliative care hospital, in a hospice, and she is just a loving person, and her connections with people were so strong. And she speaks about being there to hold people's hands, or to be there with them if they wanted her with them, and to try to, in a very diplomatic way, try to intervene a little bit if family members were having a challenge, but always putting the patient at the center of everything, and their needs and desires coming first. And I think that was the lesson for me, was that no matter how hard it was for me or anybody else, it was Mom's story.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we learned. And we learned that it's about the patient, him or her. It's about them. It's not about us. So whatever we have going on, we need to leave at the door before we enter, because they're so vulnerable. As the body decomposes and it goes through deterioration, it's as if some force, who you want to call it, depending on their own belief system, it starts to get stronger and stronger, and they're just so vulnerable to every sound, every movement, every touch, and they see people, and that we can't see. So it's amazing.
And things that, just little things I learned about her because of the heightened senses as well. Like, now that you say that, I remember a day where she was lying in bed once she was bedridden, and she said, "Oh, I can smell they're cutting the grass outside. I hear it." And I said, "Oh, is it bothering you? I'll shut the window." And she said, "No, don't shut the window, because I love the smell of freshly mown grass." Yeah. And I didn't know that about her. So, there were little tidbits that came out like that because of things that you're paying more attention to that you wouldn't normally.
That makes a lot of sense with everything that I hear from other people and from my own experience as well. Yes, that makes great sense. It seems as if your mother didn't have time to detach from the material world. Is that?
I think she did at the beginning, but I think that as things went along, because we could keep her out of pain. I think her biggest fear was pain, and her biggest fear was dying in pain or being in real discomfort. And that was what the doctor said all along. The primary thing we will do is make sure you have no pain.
Yes.
the second thing that I think he did that was so wonderful was, aside from making mom the center of everything, and the doctors and nurses always spoke to mom. They didn't speak through me.
Right.
But he was also very conscious that I was the person closest to her, and he always asked my opinion. I never felt like I wasn't an integral part of what was going on.
So, do you have other siblings that you do?
Yeah, I have a brother and
How
two
many?
sisters.
A brother and two sisters. Okay. And so I'm guessing you had a good support group after mom passed. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it was hard because all of us were dealing with it in a different way. One of my sisters didn't live in Toronto, so she was talking to mom on the phone more regularly. She could only come and visit a couple of times. So we all we went through a process, I think, of everybody having a different way of grieving. And for me, I'd lost that positive bubble. I'd lost that entire support network that was mine as much as it was hers. The doctors and the nurses and the caregivers. And so I think we did have a bit of a hard time, and we all sort of went our own way in some senses, but then we came together and we went through, we split up the things that mattered to us of mom's. And another thing she had done was things that she really felt strongly about giving to certain people. She did that before she died, so she could actually enjoy them receiving the gift.
So it sounds like you guys are a very prime example of a family who was well prepared for end of life care with your mother's situation, which is something that we're not with here in the States. We're working on it, but Belgium is definitely one of the countries that's ahead of the game. Yeah.
Well, but don't forget, I was in Canada while this was happening. So my mom was in Toronto. I left Belgium, and fortunately, I had just left my full-time job and was figuring out what I was going to do next. So I was able to go home and be her full-time caregiver.
So mom passed in Canada.
In Canada, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So and there's other places in Canada that would not have had the palliative care available that we had because we were in a big city.
Sure.
And that played a crucial role. And I think, had we been in a small community where we couldn't have people coming in all the time, and if we'd had to put her in a hospice, I don't think she would have lived 11 months. I think she wouldn't have enjoyed it. We just went on. Her bed became an island. For me, some of the best memories are that her bed became the island in the middle of the sea, and it was like we celebrated things there. So she kept going because there was always something else to motivate her, a birthday, Easter, there was always some occasion. And we would all get together and celebrate that on her bed once she was bedridden. And there was something really special in that. And I think changing to a hospital bed actually hurt that, because then it was a small bed, and she'd had, a queen size bed that we could all spread ourselves around. And so, yeah, we managed the best we could, and the support was so great. And, even when they first put her on morphine and she did start losing track of things, and we could see that we were going to lose her in a sense because of the morphine, I asked the doctor, is there not anything else we could do? I would find it really hard to continue caring for her in that way if she wasn't there mentally, and he came up with another drug, and she was lucid the whole time. And something else I would encourage people to do that I did with her was to ask her if she wanted me there when she died. Because I know now in hindsight that most people tend to die on their own.
Yes.
So we'd had that conversation, and I said to her, I would like to be there if that's okay with you, if if I'm around and it's possible. And she said she would like that. And I was there when it happened, and she was absolutely lucid until she took her last breath. And
so she wanted you present, and you ended up being there.
Yeah, and that was her final gift to me.
That is a beautiful story, and it's a beautiful outcome of a family who's well prepared for end-of-life care with support from hospice care professionals and team members who make the patient the center, and then everyone else around.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a really beautiful beautiful way that she had.
Yeah, we were lucky. It was,
Of dying.
I mean, there were some really awful times, and it's true that as time goes by, you remember those less. They were very traumatic at the time, but overall, we were able to keep her comfortable most of the time. And I think if she'd been in terrible pain, she probably would have willed herself to die earlier. But she went on living until her body just couldn't support her any longer.
So, Wendy, let me ask you this question. It is very apparent to me that you were very close to your mom and you had a good bond, right?
Absolutely.
So, um, let me ask you questions for those who are watching us and those who are going through these stages of grief and who have actively dying loved ones who they're caring for at the moment. Would you have anything to say to help them through this period? Any kind of advice or something just for them to be aware of, since you've been through that part, just going through it?
I think there's a few things. I would first of all say find out what help you're entitled to. If it means talking to a whole bunch of people, do it, and take whatever you're allowed to have. There was a certain point where you had to keep having assessments to have more hours per week for caregivers. And I just kept pushing on that so that we could, to try to push it through as quickly as possible when we felt we needed more help. So I think knowing what you're potentially entitled to can help ease the stress that you can, say at some point, I need more help now, and not have to go digging around to find what it might be when you're actually in the throes of needing it. And then I think use anybody that you can to help you. I had a girlfriend who would come periodically and take me away and take me out for dinner. When you can set up somebody to come and be with the patient, then get out of the environment to give yourself a break so that you're fresher for them when you come back.
So it's important to have respite care for the caregivers so that they can serve the one they love on a better level. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I found, because Mom wanted me there, because she was a little bit scared and she wanted me there as much as possible, there came a point where she was not sleeping as well, and she was, I was up half the night, and then I was looking after her all day, and I knew I couldn't keep doing that for a long period of time. So that's when we started calling in nighttime care. And we
were you afraid? Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Were you ever afraid that if you stepped off for a moment and took some respite care, that would be the moment that Mom would go? I mean, how do you suggest? Do you have any suggestions for people who are in that situation?
I think that's really hard, and I don't think you'll ever get away from having this fear that something's going to happen. But I think if you've had a conversation with the person and they know that you want to be with them and you want to be able to help them, I really strongly believe that they can hold on. And there were a couple of times when I got phone calls at the grocery store and I had to get home.
Right.
And that's awful. You just leave the shopping cart wherever it is and off you go, and you run, and you're petrified that you're not going to make it in time.
Right.
And I think you just have to realize you're going to have those moments, but also if everybody around is aware that they need to get to you right away on the phone, you always have a charged phone with you, and you've spoken to your loved one so they know that you want to be there to help them, then I think that's the best you can probably do to prepare yourself. And
I think but I agree with you. That's absolutely right. I really strongly agree that if they want to, they can wait. They wait for you to be there if they really want you to be there. I do. And I have learned through training, but that's how it usually goes. Yeah.
I absolutely believe my mom knew when she was ready to go. She said she was seeing my dad. My father had died 25 years before. So she was our only parent, and that made it hard too, because she'd been our only parent for 25 years. And so it was really difficult to know that we were now going to be effectively orphans.
Yes.
That had an impact.
You touch on a good point, being orphans, which leads me to our next question. I just wanted to know briefly, Wendy, would you mind telling us how it is after 4 years for you? Because I know I can see you getting teary-eyed, and you're still moved by it, and I can relate to that, of course. And again, thank you for sharing this. This is like really amazing. I think the best way to reach people and to help people is through our own suffering and grief, especially when it comes to such an important thing as death, which is inevitable for us all. Um, is there anything you'd like to tell us in terms of um, how to stay strong? I guess I don't know if I'm using the right word, because staying strong is not exactly the word I'm looking for. It's more like how to cope with the transition, because I believe personally that it's a way of living. It's a new way of living. It's something you accept to live with, and
Yes.
you probably will never be the same again. And
No.
yeah, everything will change, right? And how did you um, how did you go through this phase of transition? How did you cope? And that you're sitting there after 4 years and we're having this talk, yet you are still obviously touched, and so am I, by hearing you speak about this. What do you have to say to our viewers about that?
I think in a very strange way, um, it's off. I don't want to. I don't want the words to come out wrong, but in a way, we had practice, having lost my dad in a more traumatic way, because he didn't live that long. He was diagnosed at Easter time with lung cancer, and he died in July. So we had gone through a more wrenching loss, and I think that was one of Mom's gifts to us, was to give us the time to learn to accept it. So I think that made it a little bit easier in some ways. And afterwards, now I think part of it is that for all of us, we still miss her daily, but I think the worst of the pain has dissipated to a level where it's not pain, it's more missing. And that, I think, allows us to talk more about things we did with her and things she said in a way that we couldn't in the beginning, in the first year, 2 years, because it was still too raw. So I think as you move through it, there are positive steps that happen, because you can go back and you can think things through, and you can talk things through, and you can feel some of the emotions without being absolutely strangled by them.
Yeah. Yes,
And
they tend to
think,
they tend to give you a feeling as if someone's choking you. It's just,
yeah, really, when they come up, it's almost as if something's in your body that literally has to come out. And I think the best thing you can do is let it out. That would be another thing I would say very strongly to people. Please don't try and hold that stuff in, because it's not healthy. And I would go so far as to say that I would not question if somebody were to say that part of my mom's cancer came out of an anger that she had at my dad for leaving her.
yes.
So
Yes.
I think you have to let those emotions come out. And I've worked with a lot of wonderful healers and energy people that have helped me bring things out.
Yes.
Talking to my siblings and talking to anybody who knew her at any point, to have some of those memories to hold on to.
How about those of us who don't have that type of support group like you did?
I think then I would look for, because something I did do for myself when Mom was sick, even though I had my siblings, every one of us lived it differently, because my sister in Calgary, of course, she would have loved to have been with my mom more often, and she couldn't be. So she had to deal with some things that the rest of us didn't. My other two siblings both had busy jobs and children at the time. So what I did, knowing that what I was living was a different experience from them, I went, and part of the palliative system allowed me access to a psychiatrist. And I started seeing him early on, because I wanted to have built a relationship with him before things got critical.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I would say to people, find, whether it's friends, whether it's somebody completely new to you, find some people that you can start talking to and build up some relationships with people who can be your support network, whether they're blood relatives or not, doesn't really matter, as long as they're supportive people, and even online.
Right.
Your Facebook group is an amazing tool. I belong to another Facebook group where people are having conversations about end of life. I've just submitted an article to an online platform that's looking at re-examining the end of life experience for people and how can we make it better. And I think all of us have to, first of all, for me, the most important thing is once you've dealt with your own grief enough, talk to other people about it so that we don't keep hiding death. I think it's a terrible thing. I can see that. I now know that we can live with death in a way it's not easy, but it can have wonderful moments.
Absolutely.
So the thought of putting somebody behind a hospital door or curtain and letting them fade away is just a terrible thing to me. If, okay, I know there's situations where sometimes things are unavoidable, but I would say, if at all possible, keep as many links to their old life as you can. Live in as much of a positive bubble as you can. And
that's great advice.
And then afterwards, keep as much around you as you can cope with. And I think we all have to find our way through it. But I feel
I agree with you.
Mom left me support, and I have felt her very close to me. I know there are messages. I firmly believe that I know that there have been messages from her. So that also helps.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe in that, I think that can really help get through the hard times.
Wow. Well, that was very, very, very intense and very touching, I must say. And I have to say, on behalf of our supporters, viewers, members, and everyone, which I'm sure you've touched with your wonderful, beautiful story, I'd like to thank you, Wendy, for joining in and sharing a piece of your journey through this transition, which is definitely, if not one of, but the most important journey we all will and shall take in due time. I want to thank you for joining in, and I look forward to keeping in touch and perhaps talk with you.
That'd be wonderful, and I really appreciate you having me on, Sonora, because I just feel so strongly that we need to support those who are going through, either it's the person who's dying or the family or the friends around them, and afterwards to know that you're not alone and there's other people who've been through it, and you just need to find the right people. And I think what you're doing with this group and all the people who work in any way with the hospice system, palliative care, it's one of the most honorable jobs in the world.
Yes, it is. It is. And I always say it's not a one-man operation. We all should get together and we should do this together, because
Absolutely.
There are a lot of people who are against talking about it. And I know here in the US, we're a society and nobody wants to talk about death, which is very important. So I'm a huge hospice advocate, and I'm so honored to have you as part of our group. And for our watchers, please, if you're ever on Facebook, our group is a hospice and end-of-life care group. Feel free to join us. And it is a closed group with over 4,500 members, and they are all hospice professionals and actively dying patients and just members. And we all try to help each other and felt safe through the page, and reach out and support one another the best way we know how. So again, Wendy, thank you for joining us from Belgium.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Bless your heart, and thank you so much. I'm sending you a lot of love, and I really, really am thankful. Thank you.
Thank you. I send love to everybody listening, because it's a hard journey, but it's wonderful what you're all doing.
Thank you. You take care.
You too, Sonora.
Thank you, Wendy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.